Hello, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Allie, and today I'm so excited because I am going to start a new series on my channel. If you noticed, I got rid of a bunch of videos because I have a plan, and I haven't had a plan in a long time because I just haven't really been motivated to do things, and I was really evaluating why that was. To hear this whole spiel, I will be posting a vlog, so keep a lookout for that. But in the meantime, today we are going to do something called book and a look. So basically the premise behind this is not everyone wants to read a full book, okay? So I wanted to basically tell you guys the story of what's in the book so that you don't have to read it, but you can still enjoy the story. However, maybe you just want to recap of the story. Maybe you're doing a book report on it and you want to see it. I don't know. But I'm really sweaty. We're also going to do a look inspired by the story in some way, whether it's the cover or a character in the story. In this case, I think I'm going to do a character. I have a really interesting eye look planned. Let me do my eye drops because we're going to have a lot of eyeshadow going on. But I'm not really going to be talking about the makeup. I'm mostly going to just be applying it. And then if you have any questions about the products, look in the description box. But honestly, if you follow along, you know, similar techniques, you don't have to have the same colors, you don't have to have the same products, because ultimately it's not about the products, it's about the story. So today, I'm going to be telling you about a story called My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Hendrix. This story it really gripped me like from the start, and it inspired me to talk about it because there's a lot of talk about fashion and makeup in this book, which I found so interesting. I'm going to zoom you in a little bit so that we can get started and not, whatever. The book starts in 1982, and I didn't know much about that year, but it was the year that Ronald Reagan decided to call the war on drugs. It was the year that Epcot opened, which I didn't know that. So a lot of stuff was happening, but most importantly, the main character of the story, Abby, was turning 10 that year. So naturally, she decided to have a birthday party, and she was so excited because Abby is from a town called Charleston, South Carolina. I'm sure you guys are all familiar. It's a wealthier area, and she decided to have a huge party at the skate rink. So she invites her whole class, as you do, but unfortunately, another student named Margaret also decided to have her birthday party on that same day. And Margaret, now Abby does have money. Her parents do have money at the beginning of the story. We'll talk about that later, but Abby does come from wealth, much like the other people in this town. But Margaret has like unimaginable wealth. So she invites all of the people in the class also on the same exact day to ride ponies at her plantation. Now, Abby was incredibly upset about this. She complained to the teacher, and the teacher was like, listen, Abby, it's fine. Margaret planned this party, and it's several hours before yours, so people are going to have plenty of time to go to both, so quit complaining. So the day of the party, Abby was so excited, and sure enough, no one shows up. And she's really upset because she was so excited to show people how good she was at roller skating. Like, she'd been practicing for weeks to be good at roller skating, specifically for this birthday party. And so everything was set up. It was E.T. themed, which was like the movie of that year, and no one showed up. So Abby is really upset, and then one girl shows up, and this girl's name is Gretchen. She wasn't the most popular girl in school. She was kind of like the outcast, the nerd, whatever. And so Abby was just so irritated, but her parents were really excited, like, Abby, come on, like, your friend's here. And so Gretchen shows up and she gives her gift, which ends up being a Bible, which really upset Abby because she was super, let me make sure her name's Abby. Abby was really upset because she had been having dreams of all of her friends getting her ET stuff. So to see a Bible instead of that was just, you know. But nonetheless, she runs to the bathroom, she starts crying, and Gretchen follows her in. And Gretchen's like, listen, I did not want to get you this. My mom made me get it for you. I was going to get you something ET because I knew the theme of the party was ET. So don't be mad at me. I'm here. Like, let's have some fun. And Abby was like, you were really going to get me something that was ET themed? And she's like, duh, like, that's what the party is. But my mom made me, like, get you a Bible. So that's what I got you. So she asked Gretchen, like, do you know how to roller skate? And Gretchen is kind of sheltered. Her family's very evangelical. And she's like, no, like, not really. And Abby's like, this is like the perfect opportunity for her to teach Gretchen how to skate. So they have an amazing time. And from that day forward, Abby and Gretchen are absolutely inseparable. Now, years go by and they start growing up together, and they're the best of friends. Like, Gretchen, Abby, like, ride or die. Abby actually ends up going through some turmoil in her life. Her dad was a pilot who lost his job, and so her mom is a nurse, either a nurse or a nurse aide, and has to work a ton of hours in order to support their family. And as she gets older, they move out of the nicer area of Charleston into, like, the not so great area. But having grown up in the nicer area of Charleston, Abby continued to be friends with a lot of the people from that area. And actually, Margaret Middleton, the girl that we talked about earlier, she actually ends up becoming really good friends with Margaret. And there's also a girl named Glee that they're all really good friends with, and they're all from the nicer area of Charleston. And so is Gretchen. Gretchen's family also has a little bit of money. So when Abby is 16, they're living in this rundown house. She ends up getting a job at TCBY, and they, you know, she ends up going to the private high school on a scholarship, which is good because she can, you know, continue to be with her friends. But as a result, you know, Abby has to be a little bit more careful about things, whereas maybe Margaret and Gretchen and Glee don't have to. And so they, you know, she is careful, but maybe not as much as she should be, and we'll talk about that later. But that summer, the 16th summer, was just like any other time. And in the 80s, much like today, I mean, kids do drugs. So one night they all go to Margaret's house, which is right on the water in that, like I said, that really nice part of Charleston. And they decide to do acid. And Glee and Margaret had been waiting and scoping out dealers in order to find acid. And, you know, Abby, it's not like Abby is like against drugs or anything. It's just that she realizes that she has to be more careful. So she didn't want to really be involved in the drug dealing process in the same way that Glee and Margaret were, because obviously if they were to get in trouble for drugs, it would be a whole lot, it'd be a whole lot different for them to get in trouble for drugs than it would be for Abby to get in trouble with drugs. So one night, they're all out on Margaret's family's boat, and they decide, hey, like, do you guys want to do acid? They're like, sure, you know. Gretchen is a little bit more skeptical because, as I mentioned, she came from a sheltered evangelical home, but she ends up deciding to do it. So they all start tripping on acid, and you know, it takes a while for it to settle in. They do get off the boat, thank goodness. But nothing happens. Like, they're all just like, okay, like, when is this gonna like take effect or whatever? And really nothing happens. So eventually they start imagining that they're feeling something. So they all go outside, and Gretchen and Abby are like, let's go skinny dipping. Or Gretchen's like, let's go skinny dipping. And Abby's kind of like, I don't know about this, like, you know, like, we did this acid and the tide and all that stuff. So Gretchen goes running outside. They go to chase her. Her clothes are on the ground, and Gretchen is gone. They cannot find Gretchen anywhere. So Abby is immediately like, we have to fucking find Gretchen. Now, Glee and Margaret, like, they're not as worried at first. Like, upon initial discovery that their friend is gone, they're like, she's fine. She probably just got lost in the woods, like, or she's tripping, she's fallen asleep somewhere, it's fine. But hours and hours begin to go by, and they realize that they cannot find Gretchen anywhere. So they come across this old, there was like an old boathouse or something like on Margaret's property. And so Abby goes again looking for Gretchen, and she finds this boathouse. And in the boathouse, it's like incredibly creepy, it's decrepit, it's old, it's gross. And there's a history behind it, but she doesn't necessarily know the history. Like, she's just looking for Gretchen. And while she's in there, she sees, like, while she's in the woods, she hears someone, like, creeping around the woods, and she sees a man. And she's thinking, oh my God, like, Gretchen has been taken by a man, or she's been hurt by the man. But she gets scared and she runs out of the woods because she's like, we have to call the police. So she goes out, and Margaret and Glee are there, and she's like, there's a man in the woods. So they start freaking out, and they're like, okay, we need to call the police, we need to have a plan, blah, blah, blah. Just as they're trying to make this plan, all of a sudden, Gretchen comes walking out of the woods naked and completely dazed. Like what is going on? And they're all just absolutely relieved to find her. But Abby, being her best friend, like, immediately sees that, like, something is not right with Gretchen, but she doesn't know exactly, like, what isn't right with Gretchen. So they they get her some clothes to throw on, and they're like, where the fuck were you? You know, like, we were looking for you, like, what happened? And Gretchen just, like, doesn't want to talk about it. So sometime in the morning, oh, and by the way, she was supposed to call her parents at like 10, and she did end up calling them, so they didn't have any inkling that, like, something was wrong. So eventually Gretchen is like, I just really want to go home. And so after the long night they had, Abby agrees to take her home. Abby drives this, like, clunker of a car, and I believe she's the only one with a car. So she's like, okay, like, I'll take you home. So they get in the car, and Abby's trying to, like, understand, like, what happened. But she's also trying to give Gretchen the space to tell her. And eventually, as they're in the car, all of a sudden, Gretchen is telling Abby, like, I can feel them, like, all over me. And Abby's like, what the fuck? From that day on, Gretchen was not the same. Gretchen turned into, like, a totally different person. So this is the summertime. The school year hadn't started yet. And when the school year starts, or maybe the school year had started. Timing, questionable. I didn't say this was going to be a complete synopsis of the book. But as Gretchen is going back to school, Abby begins to notice that, like, something is just not right. Gretchen had always been an incredibly put together girl. She'd always been, you know, she always dressed really pretty. She always had her shit together, basically. And she starts to notice that as the months and months go on, Gretchen stops showering. she stops just living, basically. She's dirty, she's filthy, she stops cleaning her room, she stops eating normally, and she becomes completely withdrawn from everything, her friends, everything. And Margaret and Glee are like over it. Like, it does not take them long to be like, you know, completely over all this stuff, and to completely turn their backs on both Abby and Gretchen, because all that Abby wants is to figure out like what is wrong with her best friend Gretchen. So these months and months and months go by, and it just keeps getting worse. And as I mentioned, Abby was like a regular figure at Gretchen's family home. And so Gretchen's parents were like very familiar with Abby. And so, you know, Abby came over a lot, and as Gretchen started to withdraw, she didn't want Abby to come over as much. And Abby actually noticed that like Gretchen's house had always been like a wonderful safe haven for her, specifically because the house was like clean and nice. And she starts going over and she realizes that like the entire house has a horrible smell that like emanates from Gretchen's room. So like even the problem is like extending like to the rest of the family home. And so Gretchen's parents do confide in Abby, and they're like, do you know like what is going on? And at the time, like Abby doesn't. She's like, I don't know, you know, and she doesn't want to tell them about that night because she doesn't want to get in trouble naturally. So she really doesn't know. So she just tries to be as good of a friend as she can to Gretchen. And then one day at a school assembly, like I said, this is a Christian school. So they invite this like they're like these Christian bodybuilders to come and like give a presentation at the school about like sin or whatever. And as they're there, one of the bodybuilders named Larry looks out into the crowd at Gretchen and is like, you have something evil inside of you. And everyone just kind of laughs it off. Everyone except for Abby. So at the end of the presentation, like Abby runs out because at this point, Margaret and Glee are no longer friends with them. Gretchen, like no one wants to be around Gretchen because she's disgusting, to be quite frank. And so she goes out and she chases after the bodybuilding guys and is like, hey, like, what were you talking about back there? And the one brother's like, oh, don't listen to Larry. And Larry's like, I have a gift. I'm able to see like evil things inside of people. And Abby's like, and you saw it within, oh, I have like fallout. Whoops. Okay. Hold on. Hold please. And Abby's like, so you saw it in my friend Gretchen? And he's like, yes, I did. So Abby starts to get this feeling, and she's not 100% sure what it is, but she doesn't ever think that it's like a demon. So at this point, Gretchen stops coming to school like completely, and her parents won't let Abby in, you know, they won't do anything. And so one day Gretchen comes back to school and she's completely normal again. She looks great. She's dressed to the nines. She just looks amazing. And she has this like charisma about her again, which is something that she had like always had before prior to this incident. And so she comes back to school and she kind of like pretends to like not know who Abby is. And in fact, the way that she ends up coming back to school is like she gives her like a secret Valentine or something like Gretchen does. And she tries to talk to her, but like the stuff that like Gretchen is talking about like just doesn't make any sense. Like her reasoning behind like why she left. And she still seems off, but like in an even bigger way. So Glee and Margaret are just happy that Gretchen is back to her cool self or whatever. But even weirder stuff starts happening. The first thing that happens is this this priest at the school. Glee starts like becoming obsessed with him. Now this priest does become kind of important because this priest, Abby goes to him to talk about Gretchen when all of this stuff goes on, and she realizes that this priest is already aware of the things going on with Gretchen, and he thinks that she's just fine and won't really allow Abby like to confide in him about Gretchen like at all. So that's the first thing she notices. And then she starts developing, or he starts developing, this kind of odd relationship with Glee. And if you try to talk to Glee about it, you can't tell her anything. So that was the first thing that Abby noticed. Then Abby noticed that Margaret's boyfriend had always kind of had a thing for Gretchen, and Gretchen never acted on it. And this guy his name was Walter. He was kind of a creep. And then all of a sudden, Margaret became kind of interested in Walter. So that was kind of odd. And then one day, Gretchen comes to school. And I do want to mention that, like, throughout all of this, she completely turns against Abby when Abby starts to confide in other people that something may be going on with Gretchen. And so Margaret and Glee, where at first they didn't want to have a relationship with Gretchen, now they don't want to have a relationship with Abby. But they allow Abby to continue to sit at their table, and it gives Abby the chance to kind of watch Gretchen and like see what's going on. And so one day she starts bringing these like shakes to school, and Margaret at this point had become kind of obsessed with weight loss. And Gretchen's like, yeah, like, these are my mom's, like, she doesn't drink them, like, I'm just trying to like lose a little bit of weight, like, do you want some? And like Margaret's like 100% I want some, can you get them for me? So she takes all of these shakes, and slowly and surely Margaret starts losing like a lot of weight, like a lot of weight. And so all this stuff is going on, and Abby is just kind of like, this is so weird. Like, how is no one thinking that this is so weird? Like, just a few months ago, no one was friends with Gretchen. They all hated her. And now all of a sudden, like, I'm bad person number one, public enemy number one, and Gretchen is suddenly like Miss Popular. And I want to reiterate, I didn't iterate at all. At no point does Abby care about popularity. This has absolutely nothing to do with popularity. Abby does not care about that at all. She's truly just so concerned about Gretchen and like what the fuck is going on. So she finally confronts her about it, and she catches her on a day when she's a little bit more vulnerable and she's like kind of acting like her old self. And Gretchen confides in her that she keeps having flashbacks to that night of someone touching her, of someone like doing things to her, and she has trouble sleeping because she can feel his nails on her back and blah blah blah. And this is like when Abby realizes that she thinks that Gretchen has been sexually assaulted, and she thinks, okay, I need to tell someone. So she goes to Gretchen's parents and tells them what happened that night. She leaves some stuff out, but she does tell them about the drugs and says, you know, do you guys deserve to know about this, blah, blah. And rather than being concerned about their daughter's sexual assault, they get mad at Abby and forbid her from ever coming to their house again. So Abby's like, okay, like, what the fuck is happening? So then the next day, she gets called into the principal's office, and the principal gets involved. And the principal is like, if I ever hear you talking about Gretchen's sexual assault, like, you will be suspended. And all of this is like, Abby is like, what is going on? Like, why is everyone like more upset about, you know, this than anything else? And furthermore, Gretchen's parents also told the principal that Abby was dealing drugs, which was not true. And so Abby's like, what is happening? So, you know, at this point, maybe Abby should have left it alone, but she doesn't. And she notices two odd things. The first one is that Gretchen and her had always had a regular phone call at 11:07 at night. That was like their regular time. And for several months prior to this, she had stopped the phone call because she was talking to her friend Andy from camp. And so that's the first thing that Abby notices. And then the second thing that she notices is that Gretchen is constantly writing in this notebook, like just all the time, just like madly scribbling. And she had noticed that prior to her getting better. So Abby wants to get to the bottom of this, so she decides to steal the notebook and see what's in it. And she notices some strange things in this notebook. She notices that there's ramblings about, like, this isn't me, this isn't me, this isn't me. There's flashbacks, and it's almost like there's like two different people writing this in this day journal or whatever. And so that immediately sets Abby off. And so she ends up meeting with Larry again, because after reading the journal, well, actually before that too, she tried to call Andy. And she looked him up in the phone book, and when she called him, Andy was like, I haven't talked to Gretchen in like years. And so Abby's like, what do you mean? Like, she says she talks to you every night. And he's like, she doesn't talk to me. And so Abby ends up finding a phone number like in Gretchen's little journal. And so she calls that, thinking, okay, maybe this is who she's been talking to every night. And it's labeled as Andy's phone number, which she knows isn't true because she already called Andy. And when she calls it, the voice that she hears is Gretchen. And she's like, Gretchen, like, is that you? And she's like, Abby, like, you have to help me. I have been possessed by something and it will not let me out. Like, it's getting stronger. If you don't help me soon, like, something bad is gonna happen. Like, you won't be able to save me at all. So Abby is like not 100% convinced that this is true, but very much like, I have to do something. In the meantime, she gets called into the principal's office again. And he's like, I think you stole something from someone. And she's like, oh, like, what am I gonna do? And so she doesn't say anything because she's just like really scared, because like I said earlier, the stakes are quite different for her than they are for the other girls, right? That's why she didn't want to get in trouble for a lot of the things that other people wouldn't necessarily worry about. And so they call both of her parents in to this meeting where they're accusing her of this. And they basically tell Abby that, you know, she can either drop out of school, like to go to a different school, or like she's going to be expelled. And Abby's like, oh my God, like, this is Gretchen doing this, or whoever's inside of Gretchen. And in the meantime, like I hadn't mentioned, like Margaret was getting incredibly ill. Like, she was losing weight like so much that like it looked like she was dying, which was like, of course, made Abby be like, what the fuck? And then we'll get to Glee in a minute, but all this is happening and Abby's like, well, maybe it is best if I just go to another school. Because they're like doing this despite the fact that like Abby's grades are perfect. Like throughout all this, like her grades hadn't dipped or anything. And her mom is like, no, like you are not gonna fucking do this to my daughter. Like you're doing this because we're not one of those rich people anymore, and I refuse to allow my daughter to be kicked out. Like I have dirt on every single one of you guys, and you can call me white trash or whatever, but like we're not going down without a fight. So Abby is kind of like happy because for the first time her mom is like, and her family just in general is actually like standing up for her, because for a while she's been on her own, you know, like her mom works a ton, her dad is like super depressed about everything, so he hasn't been working in a long time, and it's just been incredibly difficult. So the principal backs down, but is like, this isn't the last of this, basically. And Abby walks out and she's like trying to thank her mom, and her mom's like, you're not gonna fucking thank me. I told you that this would happen. I told you these people were dangerous, but I'm not gonna let them accuse you of things. She said, but if I find out that you've been dealing drugs, and if I found out you stole something, like you're gonna get in massive trouble. So in the meantime, I don't know if I mentioned that they went on a field trip to this like medical lab, and it was like a cadaver lab, and that day was kind of odd because Gretchen was like nicer to Abby than normal, and that's kind of the pattern with Gretchen. Like she would be nice some days to Abby, and then other days like Abby would be public enemy number one. So this day in particular, she was kind of nice to Abby. But then when they got into the cadaver lab, Gretchen started asking like all these weird questions about the aborted fetuses that were in jars, which made Abby incredibly sick. And so she gets sick. She has like a visceral reaction like at this field trip, and she ends up just like going home, sitting on the bus by herself, and she just like doesn't want to have anything to do because she's like, this is not my friend Gretchen. So after this trip, she realizes she has to do something. So she calls Larry from the bodybuilding troupe, and she's like, what can you do for me? Like, what can you do for my friend Gretchen? And he has a theory about who the demon is, and he tells her, like, if you can get Gretchen to like go on a weekend trip, then maybe like we'll be able to exorcise this demon out of her. And Abby's not sure how she can do this, but she does know that her life is falling apart, and if something doesn't happen, like there are going to be consequences for everyone. So she says that she'll do it. That same day, she's walking outside of school, and all of a sudden she looks up into the bell tower and she sees Glee, who is threatening to kill herself because she's in love with the priest at the school and alleges that they're having an inappropriate relationship and that she's gonna kill herself. And so she goes to jump off the bell tower, but Abby runs up as fast as she can to like catch her and ends up pulling her off. And Glee is just like sobbing, like, I can't deal with this anymore, like I have to kill myself. And Abby's like, this is crazy, like maybe, like she just doesn't know. And then that same week, Margaret looks sick. She looks so sick, and she actually, her boyfriend had stopped seeing her and had started being with Gretchen, and then when Margaret said something, he was like, I don't want to be with like a bag of bones or whatever. So Margaret stopped coming to school. So when Abby starts figuring out that she has to do something, she goes and visits Margaret in her home, and much to her surprise, Margaret is dying. Like, she is literally like days, possibly hours away from passing away from anorexia. And that's, you know, Abby had realized the gravity of all of this. Like, I know I keep saying that, like, this is when she realized, but like that moment was the moment that she's like, she couldn't at first figure out how she was going to defeat this demon inside of Gretchen. And she still wasn't, but she knew that she had to. So she calls Larry and she says, yes, get everything that you need together. Like, we're going to do this now. So she goes home to get her stuff together, and Gretchen walks into her house and is like, I know that you have my notebook and I know you're planning something. And in the meantime, Abby had called the priest, had gotten a hold of the priest and was like, there's something wrong with Gretchen. He's like, yeah, I know. Like, I've gotten wrapped up in this too. And she's like, I have proof that Gretchen is not herself. And so they were going to meet and prove, she had the proof, she had the notebook, that something was going on with Gretchen. But that day, Gretchen came into her house and she was like, you stuck your nose in somewhere that it doesn't belong, you stupid bitch, basically. And she goes and she takes the notebook. And Abby's like, this is my connection to her. Like, what am I going to do? And so, and this is my proof. Well, not only had she done that, there had been a issue after that field trip that I mentioned where someone had come in to the cadaver lab and stolen those baby fetuses. And right after Gretchen leaves, the police come with a search warrant to search their house. And Abby's like, Gretchen got the notebook, but what they find in the house ends up being those stolen fetuses. And they accuse Abby of stealing those in order to perform like a ritual or whatever, like a satanic ritual. And Abby's just like, Gretchen did this. Like, Gretchen brought the fetuses in here, like whenever she came in here for the, you know, to get the notebook. So she gets arrested and they end up letting her be on house arrest. But they're like, you're gonna get in trouble for this. And so Abby had already planned to do the exorcism the next day, but she calls Larry and she's like, we need to speed up this process. Like, it's getting worse. So she sneaks out, he comes to pick her up and he has all the stuff and he's like, all you have to do is get Gretchen in the car and we have to go away for the weekend because we obviously can't we can't do this in our house where people are going to see. So she goes into the house, Abby does, and the house, she hadn't been in it in weeks because the parents were like, you are no longer allowed in our home. So the house was just disgusting. Like, there was nothing in the fridge but like Diet Cokes and like, I don't know, just nasty shit. The house smelled. And the most prominent thing was she realized that she couldn't hear their dog Max. And Max was like a prominent part of the family. And she's like, okay, like, where is Max? So she hears Gretchen walk downstairs and she hides because she's hoping to just kind of like knock her out. Like, she has an injection to give her and she's hoping that she can quickly just give it and whatever. But she realizes that Gretchen can like smell her. And so Gretchen finds her and she's like, okay, like, you might as well come upstairs and like, let's have a talk. Because like the gig is up. So like, let's talk about it. So when Abby goes upstairs, Gretchen like is like holding the dog hostage. And she admits to Abby that like, yeah, like, I'm not Gretchen. Like, your friend's gone, sis. And there's nothing you can do about it. And Abby is freaking out and she witnesses Abby kill the family dog, or Gretchen kill the family dog. And she's like, this is bad. Like, this is really, really bad. So she takes that moment to like try to attack her. And as she's attacking her, Gretchen's like real personality starts to come out and she's telling Abby like, you need to help me. Like, you need to get this demon out of me. So as the demon is like distracted, she ends up getting the injection into Gretchen and knocking her out, and then taking her out to the car in order to take her to get exorcised or whatever. Now, there's several several problems with this. You know, she's supposed to be on house arrest. She's not supposed to see Gretchen. Her parents have completely forbade it. The police have forbade it. Everyone's forbade it. And so at this point, she's a criminal on the run, and she knows this, but to her, it is like worth it in order to save the lives of not only Gretchen, but also like Margaret and Glee and like all the people that have been hurt through this. So they go to Margaret's family's beach house, and they begin to perform this exorcism, which ends up being incredibly difficult. And it's freaking Abby out, because as they're doing it, oh, and something else I forgot to mention, because I just realized, I looked at my eye makeup and I said, oh, we're going to talk about how the connection to this makeup and blah, blah. I completely forgot to mention that one of the symptoms that something was really wrong with Gretchen was like she began to get like really, really, really bad acne. But then when she got better, Abby started to get really bad acne. So as a way to cope, Abby started wearing heavy makeup in order to like hide all of the acne that she was beginning to develop that had actually cleared up like from puberty on. Anyway, sidebar, but yeah. So Larry, it goes for hours and hours and hours. And they find out that there is in fact a demon in Abby, and it is not letting her go. And they find out that Abby's spirit is still, or her soul is still left in that lake house and has been there. And they're like, this demon is just not letting go. And so Larry tells Abby, like, I can't do it. Like, I can't do it. I cannot get this demon out of her. Like, I'm sorry. And they know that they don't have a lot of time, because they know that the police are going to come and they're going to arrest Abby, and it's going to all be for nothing because they can't get this demon out of her. And so, as uncomfortable as she is with the whole thing, because she is worried that Gretchen is going to die, because the entire process is just so scary and like so much for Gretchen's like poor little body. But Abby does realize like something's got to happen. But Larry just gives up. He's like, I have to call my dad, because his dad is also an exorcist. And he's like, I can't do this. And so Abby knows that there's not a lot of time. So she's like, you know what? Fuck this. I'll do it myself. Where did I put my mascara? And so she starts performing the exorcism on Gretchen. And by the grace of all things holy, it worked. She got the demon out of Gretchen herself. She didn't need the help of the exorcist, because what she needed to do was do it herself, because Gretchen needed to hear her best friend's voice in order for this exorcism to be successful. I think we're going to do that. So while that's all great news, Abby's still a convict. So as they're like hugging because Gretchen is finally back, the police come and they see Gretchen in such a bad way, and the parents come, and Abby gets arrested. And she gets arrested for many things. She gets arrested for the baby fetuses. She gets arrested for the murder of the family dog, for breaking and entering, for kidnapping, like all this stuff. And despite the fact that Gretchen is telling them like, hey, like that's not true, because now that Gretchen's back, she's able to say, you know, this isn't true. No one will listen to her. So Abby ends up getting arrested, and everyone testifies against her, and it's just a shit show. But last minute, Larry comes in and takes the blame for everything and ends up going to prison for Abby's crimes. Well, not really Abby's crimes, for Gretchen's crimes. And to him, it's worth it, because I forgot to mention that like he literally left the premises to go get his dad. So when the police and Gretchen's parents showed up, like he was gone. So it was only Abby and Gretchen like in the house. And so even though you know, it's revealed that Abby didn't do this, it's not common knowledge that Gretchen was possessed by a demon. And so Abby's reputation is essentially ruined. So they decide to move away to a different town in order to get a fresh start. And both sets of parents absolutely forbid the girls from seeing each other, which was devastating for them because it was like they finally got their friendship back, only for it to be like ripped away from them again. So they move away, but one day Abby, she hears this like noise outside and she looks and it's Gretchen, because she had been able to call, her letters were getting returned, like there was just like no way for them to get in contact with each other. So Gretchen just shows up and she's like, I'm gonna get arrested for like stealing cars, like stealing all this stuff, but like I had to see you again, like I had to I had to do this. And so the parents realize like they're not going to be able to keep them apart. So they allow them to have a friendship, and they never again really talk about what happened. They don't talk about the lost year when Gretchen had the demon inside her. Like they don't talk about any of that. And instead they just like focus on being friends. And so they talk, you know, every single night, like they go to separate colleges and they do all this stuff. But slowly and surely, like most friendships do, they end up fizzling out, you know, and a once a day call turns into once a week, which turns into once a month, and things just begin to slow down until Abby gets a divorce. And who's there by her side? Gretchen. And when Gretchen has her first child, Abby's there, and all throughout their lives, the one person that they could count on was each other. And when things fell apart, it was them. And when Abby died, Gretchen was by her side. And so that's the end of the story. And I hope that this was interesting to you, because what I loved about this story was that underneath the surface, this story was a story about friendship. Like it was about the power of female friendship, and like the power of like the fact that female friendship can like overcome anything, which was such a theme for the 80s anyway, like girl power and like girl friendship. But I just felt like it was so prominent in this book, and that's why I wanted to talk about it. And with this look, I decided to do like a green kind of like graphic liner situation with some green, or a blue graphic liner situation with some green sparkle, and then a like purple cool tone mauve lip. And I didn't wear a lot of blush. I probably should have worn more blush. Let's put on a little more. We'll put on a little more blush in honor of the 80s. This is a more pink blush than what I initially put on. They obviously didn't wear highlighter in the 80s, and I think their eyebrows were different, but it's okay. There we go. But I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and if there's any books you want me to read and discuss, let me know. I'll probably try to do mostly spooky books because I just think that that's like so fun. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.